Derivatives trading involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results.
So stressful when the world's on fire. Good God. I can't look at this, guys. Like, my strategy is you buy it and you hope that you got a good spot. Yeah, but we all think you're crazy. You don't fight this. No way. The markets are freaking out and you don't think that anything is wrong? Come back tomorrow and I'll lose it all. Should be fun.
Good morning, everybody. Well, we have unemployment numbers today. Should be interesting. Markets are down, and yields coming down also. But I can't really see my charts here because I don't know. Ninja Trader's being weird today. Like, look at this. It's not. I think that something hung. How's it doing, Lucas? Here bright and early, eh? Well, I believe that Ninja Trader has crashed while starting up. Unusual. Usually just fine on that, but hey, it's never perfect. Over here. Let's just kill it here, see if we can. I expect a down day for treasuries. Also, Powell will open his mouth at the ES market open. Why do you think down? That's interesting. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of weird how all of the sudden the market will go into this like, oh, growth is going to be so bad. I know that yesterday we were at all-time highs and we were making it look like there's just no way you can ever lose with buying stocks. But now today everything is terrible. Could be tax, yeah. Could be their expectation of higher taxes in the tax bill that the Democrats are throwing around here, right? A possibility. Okay, well, the window. Okay, there's one window that didn't show up before, but my main ES ain't showing up over here. Come on. There we go. Okay. I feel there's too much pressure built into the 185 area. Which instrument are you talking about there? It's nice to see you here right at the beginning of the stream, eh? Okay, here we go. All right, so yesterday, things started out well, and I think it was really the Powell's speech that pushed the markets up when they got the text of his speech, because PPI was really high, okay? But then nothing really too significant came out of his speech other than just like he wants to remain dovish. Maybe there's been this bet about whether they'll announce tapering at Jackson Hole. Seems like the market is saying no. But then there was all this stuff about the Democrats' tax, $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. 185. Oh, I see. 185 in the trader. Okay. Anyway, so markets came down, and now you can see here in the overnight session, things coming down. And I didn't see any kind of like news when I was reading through the squawks. They actually didn't really say anything about markets being down. So the treasuries, you can see here, all over the place, man, past few days. So they are now well above where we were before the CPI. So they're saying that the CPI isn't the thing to look at. Is my take on that right now. They seem to care about other things. I mean, the CPI is a negative. It is inflation one way or another. Will it go away? Well, I suppose maybe the market thinks that is, but maybe the market also thinks that there's other things going on that are more important. We shall see. Many theories about why it's doing that. Oil, on the other hand here, not doing so hot at the moment. Now, and when they get an OPEC deal, things might improve. The analysts still seem to be pretty bullish on oil, but it is interesting because oil had been doing really great and was kind of being like your go-to inflation hedge. Now even that is going weak. Gold and silver, though, are doing well. Gold and silver are doing well. Copper's still sideways. And I think gold and silver are doing well, probably in part because the dollar is just getting creamed here. But as the E-mini has been coming down, the dollar has been strengthening some. Now they might be trying to front run this news that we're about to get here, huh? Maybe. Let's make sure that we got everything set up here. Okie dokie. Oh, and the Texas speech. Good morning, Win. You think there's too much pressure in that 18 half area? I don't know. Like it, they look bullish still, though. It's interesting. This is really interesting. Well, let's see. So for the initial jobless claims, the estimate is 360K. If that number were to come in below expectations by any significant margin, all right, well, here it's coming. Oh, I didn't turn the squawk on. Oops. Okay, it is higher than the forecast. Oh, it's actually in line with the forecast that I had here. So 360 versus 360. But the squawk was expecting 350. So Philly Fed actual 21.9 versus forecast 28, well below the expectation. And Empire Fed, well, 43 versus an 18 expected. Well, that's really odd. Okay, so that kind of sets up a good situation, though, for the market. That's a situation where you could maybe buy all the things. Look at the 10-year go. Oops. What did I just do there? There we go. I'm going to have to go for 2 here. Ah, snap. Nah, I'm gonna... That was not what was supposed to happen. I'm just gonna... Even though I said I'm gonna give it to him, I'm gonna try and get out of that. That doesn't look good, does it? That flipped around so quickly. I guess not. Well, I tried it twice and it didn't work out. So I don't have it. Let's see here. What am I missing? Well, they could steepen here. Philadelphia Fed July price paid 69.7 versus June's 80.7. Hey, Keller. Oh, and yeah, when saying, hey, click that like button. Thank you.
If you haven't hit the like yet, then please do this for the channel. Thanks.
I don't know. I just took 2 losers in a row. Maybe the like button isn't the isn't the appropriate course of action today. Oh, it was looking so good on the upside and it flipped back down so hard. There might be some steepening coming in here. I say that, but my charts show flattening. Oh, you're lucky that we didn't see it because there's no screen. I took a one tick scalp twice and lost. I tried buying in the treasury here and it came back. It looked bullish. Should have listened to Lucas. He said 18.5. Look at that. I'm looking for it to continue through, and it's not doing that in either of these, is it? See that right there? Isn't the way that I want the trade to go. Should be already down there, and it's coming back. That means that it was bad. Bad call. Boom. Yep. Kind of curious, as they're moving around like this, they are doing it in concert. Look at that. It's fairly strong ticks as it goes, but we've had it up and down. The way that this flow is coming through in the 5-year kind of makes me think that there must be some disagreements with the spreads. Missed the fill at 20.5. Short. I don't know. This looks to me like actions where if it's really clear that a spot is going to hold, that you're not going to get a fill. You know. I think on that one at 20 that I kind of just got lucky. Yeah, as it bounced back, it was close. Seth, just lucky, I guess. Not, I guess. I'm pretty sure that me catching that one on was largely luck. The first child tax credits have begun going out, so I hear. The government sent me a mail about that. Yeah, I did take it again at 20. And then when it ticked down pretty strongly. I don't know. I should probably be taking that one because it's not showing me as of yet that I could really easily get filled at 18.5. It would be a little bit too much volume for it to get through, but it's a good short, yeah. Why did one take hire such a chicken? I don't know. What was it that made me think short? I don't know. I guess I kind of saw flattening overall. It's a little difficult, I think, to make sense of these numbers. Initial jobless claims 360 versus an expected 360, but then New York Empire State Manufacturing Index 43 versus an estimated 18. That's kind of crazy. But then the Philadelphia Fed Manufacturing Index 21.9 versus 28. So when I was seeing those numbers live, I was like, oh, okay, Philadelphia Fed, it's down a little. I mean, that's not like a ton, but it's a decent amount, and in a normal market that would be enough, for maybe a little bit of a move. And then the New York Empire State Manufacturing Index came in at 43, and I'm like, what is going on? Well, so I'm not so sure that the downside is done. Oh, that might be too easy of a fill though. Yeah. I'm gonna give some back right there. Yep. I've been up in the middle of this week, and on the news they talk crime on the right side of the aisle and inflation on the left side. Is it really the guys on the left talking about inflation? Well, let me tell you what I see going on in the news. What's been on my mind. Look at that, 20.5 again. 21. I don't know, dude. I think when I took that trade, I think I was just lucky. Because this just looks like a big mess. So what was I going to say? News. What are the pieces of news going around? Well, so first starters, inflation for sure. I see a lot of people trying to convince everyone that the inflation is not a big deal. And it's kind of funny because it's like, last report I was making this argument. Hey, when you take out the new car sales, it wasn't bad. It was actually an okay number. It wasn't as bad as the previous month when you take out the car sales. Then this latest report, though, every number in that report was high. I don't know how you come in and you say, oh, it's no big deal on that one. That just boggles the mind a little bit to me, especially the food inflation being up as much as it is. And I'm, one of the things that the Powell said yesterday that I thought was telling was he said, just because the factors are transitory doesn't mean that they're here today and gone tomorrow. It's like, okay, so then what do you think transitory means? But I think that the kind of the suggestion is these are factors that are unusual and they aren't necessarily being caused. I mean, it's possible, I suppose, but they aren't necessarily being caused by the path of monetary policy. And as such, changing the monetary policy doesn't necessarily fix those problems, right? And that's the real thing to really think about there is like, if they raise interest rates, is it going to decrease the price of used cars? No, because it's not going to make the chips get here faster. You know what I mean? But it is a high inflation number. Okay, there's no way around that. So that's the first one, and I see a lot. I saw a lot of. Oh, it's not so bad. The equity traders really want to ignore it is really what I think it comes down to. Like, we're at really exceptionally high levels. I'm a little unsure what we use to continue moving up in the ES, although if history tells us anything, it will just continue. But we're like beyond people's targets and stuff. So I feel like you need something to keep going, and they don't necessarily have it. So I feel like the equity traders are trying to convince themselves that it can stay up here a little bit. Can you imagine Powell being, well, it kind of is a big deal now. Like, he would never say that, but he would be more than willing to say the opposite. Oh, can you imagine Powell, like, he's saying, well, it kind of is a big deal now. Yeah. Yeah, well, I think that Powell has painted himself into a corner. Like, there's been so many times since he's been Fed president that he gets on that news conference, and because of something that he said, the markets go down and there's a big freak out and he looks really terrible. So now he is like really careful about saying anything that could ever possibly harm the markets, to the point where he basically is like almost lying to them, I think. In some cases, I'm not necessarily saying it's like that with inflation, but you're right. It's like, if inflation really was a big deal, he wouldn't say it in the press conference, because the last thing he would want to do is make the equity markets go down right now. So there's that. Okay. Anyways, so here's the next big piece of news that I see going around. Right, is the Cuba thing. Have you watched the news about Cuba? It's a little weird, to be honest with you. I think this is a case where there isn't a clear partisan bias in terms of how we should react to Cuba. I mean, I guess there kind of is emerging a partisan split in how we should deal with Cuba, but at least initially it's not necessarily seen as, because we all know that it's a dictatorship and a tyrannical government and everything, right? Oh, look, now they take 18.5. But now this thing is emerging. Did you see this stuff the other day? The immigration officials saying, people in Cuba, don't try crossing the water because we're going to send you, somewhere else. Like if you're concerned about if you go back to Cuba, you'll be prosecuted, then we'll send you to a third country. But don't come to the U.S. because you're not coming to the U.S. That is like, what the heck? Like, they were they've been so nice about everybody from Honduras coming over, and the Democrat Party have been acting like they want it so that everybody in Honduras should be able to come to the United States and claim asylum. It's like really crazy. But then they're telling the Cubans to go back. Like, what? Like, actually, what? The only reasonable explanation I can come up for that one is because Cubans vote Republican. I don't know, man. It's really crazy, right? It's really, really crazy. Is it propaganda? Well, I don't know. I do kind of. So here's the thing. From our perspective, from my perspective, especially here in Utah, kind of seems like some of this stuff is happening out of the blue, right? But the thing that you got to realize is that all of these lockdowns that we've had across the world have consequences, significant consequences. And we didn't see them initially, but now we're seeing them. Remember everybody saying that, shutting down things over here, it doesn't necessarily have a huge impact on us, but like people in Africa that can't get food and stuff like that. Well, what's happening now, right? South Africa riots, Cuba riots. I think it's all in the same places. These very repressive governments that don't have a lot of money, can't vaccinate their population, and lockdowns are destroying their economy. They can't weather it like we are, and so their populaces are fighting back. And it's just kind of been like excuses, certain things used as an excuse to get it started, so that Cuba has already developed their own vaccine, but they're still complaining that they're not getting vaccinated. I didn't hear anything from my friend in South Africa. Maybe things are going too crazy over there. I don't know. Yeah. So and that's the other thing that I see going on is the South Africa thing. I don't know if the people in the U.S. really understand. I don't know if I completely understand it. I think it's kind of strange that the guy. So the whole thing was over the former president is being investigated for corruption, and he's been not cooperating, and so they held him in contempt of court, and he's in prison right now, and that's why they're like starting to riot. But like he hasn't been president for 3 years. The whole thing is kind of interesting. True, Argentina is buying those vaccines. 3 million of Cuba's 11 million population is vaccinated. Yeah, my point was that they don't have a very high vaccination rate, and if you want to be vaccinated, there are some people there that really want to be vaccinated that aren't. Whereas in the United States, pretty much everybody that wanted to be vaccinated is vaccinated, right? Americans government jumped all over the pumping. We need to do a ground invasion. Well, I think it plays a factor. I think that when you combine, not everybody's getting vaccinated, and like people are going hungry, and you're a tyrannical government, it kind of all creates a little bit of pressure to create I don't think that this. I guess what I'm saying is that if this pandemic wasn't happening, I'm not so sure that you would have the opportunity to overthrow the Cuban government like they have right now. Although I don't know if it's really a very great opportunity. I'm super skeptical that anything would happen. You know? Okay, so RJ Will wanted to ask a question. You should just ask the question. You ask a question like that, I always come back to it. Hopefully I come back to it. Or you ask me multiple questions. Mohammed LL Rain retweets Lisa Abramowitz. Abramowitz. The fact that both CPI and PPI are running hot is consequential, suggests that realized inflation is being accompanied by additional inflation in the pipeline. This goes against the Fed's often repeated conviction that inflation is transitory. RJ says, I wanted to make sure you saw. I think they're playing off the struggle of Cuba. So what evidence do you have to support that theory? Like the original point that I was trying to make with Cuba is that I do not see the signs of organized messaging on Cuba that I normally do. Okay, Seth, a few weeks ago you said you had a study on average moves of instruments. Yes, I think it was 24 ticks. I thought it was good stuff. Could we go over that again? So have I ever shown you the range plots? Just be mad at the Cuban government and not understand that it's not really their government's fault, but rather America's? I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that one, but... Oh, by the way, I need to... Hold on. Should turn this on now. Probably should have turned it on a lot earlier, actually. Got so caught up in trying to trade the treasury here, which, by the way, is just kind of sitting down at the lows now. But but would really like it to take a trade today. Bill Clinton increased the embargo for no... Yeah, and then Obama, like, completely got rid of almost everything.
Order submitted.
That's not what's supposed to happen, but okay. Is it propaganda? Okay. Hold up. Define propaganda. It might be time to change this contact here. That's really weird. I wonder if that was just another luck, but that's like the third time in a row now that that's happened to me. Like here's the thing. So if I go by the book definition of propaganda, information, especially of a biased or misleading in nature, used to promote or publicize a particular political cause or point of view. If you go from that definition, like everything that you see on the news is propaganda, right? Propaganda is stuff one country says about themselves or about another country that tries to control the narrative and promote their interests, basically, in an unfair, shady way. Okay, so that makes no... Okay, so if that was the case, then why aren't I seeing 24/7 coverage from CNN advocating for them to evade, and from ABC? You're saying, like, are they saying it on Fox? I don't know if they're saying it on Fox. The only person that I've seen that says we should invade it is the mayor of Miami. And you know why I think he's saying it? I think he's saying it because he has a lot of people that have an interest over there because they came from the oppressive Cuban regime and they would like to see that situation resolved. Right? Like the assertion that it's a government strategy to convince the people of the United States that we should take over Cuba, I think is just preposterous. No one is... Oh, did he say no one has been killed? This is a one is really... I'm trying to tread really carefully here because I'm not trying to express an opinion on the larger Cuban matter. Obviously, from my point of view, I would like to see the Cuban regime gone, but I'm not trying to argue that it should be gone, nor am I trying to say, like, I understand the key reason why this is happening and that it's genuine from the people and not from... All I'm trying to prove here is that your opinion does not seem to be based on facts. What you're saying sounds very much like a knee-jerk reaction, like I'm partial to communism or socialist governments, And I think that the United States has been unfair to Cuba. So this is a line that communists and socialist supporters push a lot, is they say, well, the only reason why socialist regimes always fail is because the United States interferes in their internal affairs. And they point to Cuba as a good example of that. And so when we see that there are protests in Cuba, if that's your worldview, then the knee-jerk reaction has to be, well, it must be from the United States government, right? And I'm just saying, like, what evidence do we have for that? There's literally no evidence for that. So like, let's go back and let's try and establish what are some facts that we can really, like, reasonably make conclusions from, right? Okay. So one fact that you guys noted was that Cuba does have a vaccine, but that a very low percentage of the population has been vaccinated, and they have been implementing pretty strict restrictions over there. Okay. So they are experiencing economic pain from it. Okay. Maybe people don't unilaterally love living under authoritarian communist regimes, right? Miami Herald says today the Cuban government will lift restrictions so travelers will be able to take unlimited food, medicines, and hygiene products without paying customs duties, a measure taken after Cubans took to the streets Sunday to ask for food, medicines, and, the end of the dictatorship. Okay. So, like, if I'm going to go down and I'm going to list the reasons for it, it seems to me that poverty and the pandemic and not liking living under a dictatorship are all factors, possible factors. Okay. Now, there's a fourth factor that we've talked about, and that is the American government is interfering in internal Cuban affairs and causing these protests to happen. Or, is that a potential factor in there? I see no evidence of that. So then let's go to the move the goalpost argument per se, which is it's not the United States that's pushing it, but the United States media responds to that event in a biased way, right? Which I think is kind of more his point. Here's the thing. What's wrong with wanting the communist dictatorship in Cuba gone? I quite frankly, I very much, what is the word? I'm a little partial to the Miami mayor's opinion, let's say. Why can't we help them? I don't know if we should have a land invasion, of course, but why can't we help them? Like, we helped Libya. We got involved in Syria. Where else did we get involved in? There's all these places in the Middle East that the U.S. government, like, literally got involved. Why this doesn't make any sense to me? Can you explain that? The first baby pigs did not go so well. It is true. But no, explain this. Why is it that the United States government can assist rebels in Libya to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi, and they can intervene in Syria and cause a huge multi-year civil war in Syria, and many other places, but then when it's Hong Kong or Cuba, we can't do anything? And it seems to me I see a pattern, and that is that the places that we refuse to intervene in are the communist governments. Did you guys watch all of the pre-typed setup questions for the Fed rep yesterday? Well, so, Gus, I think that the big thing coming off of Powell's testimony yesterday was that the market doesn't expect that they're going to announce any kind of taper at the Jackson Hole conference like they were. And it didn't appear that he really said anything significant beyond that. So even though I think that we will probably continue to have some market volatility around his comments again today, I'm not expecting there to be much long-term impact from his testimony. We intervened in Vietnam and look at how that turned out. Well, that's a very much more complicated sort of a thing, isn't it? I know. I would like to continue having this conversation, but I think to continue having this conversation, I need to have a better understanding of what Keller's essential thesis is. His treasury is coming back up to highs. Look at this. They were chilling down there all that time saying, hey, Seth, why don't you go short? We want you to go short. Okay, fine. If you're not going to go short, then we'll go up anyways. My eye feels like I got like oh man. Like it feels like I got an eyelash in it, but it might just be irritation on my eye. Anyways. Uzi says go short now, fool. Well, that certainly looks like a good place to do it. So what is the central thesis here? Is the thesis that the United States should not get involved in Cuba? Because I felt like you were saying more than that. Because I think that they should get involved in Cuba. I don't think that their involvement should involve U.S. soldiers, so. Richard Freeman says, so this is mostly political chat? Well, I wouldn't say mostly, but we talk about political stuff all the time, yeah. It's a really important part of the markets, and it's a really important part of understanding the world. And understanding the world is really important to effective trading. Well, certainly discretionary trading. Do you have an eyelash? I don't think so. I really don't think so. I think that this contact might just be old. Maybe I've worn this contact longer than I was supposed to, and I just don't recall. Only when I show up to disagree. No, you missed some really great arguments, Keller. We talk about. I think it's worth talking about. I'm sorry if here's another thing is if there's something about the market right now that you think warrants discussion, then of course make a comment on it, and I'm really likely to respond to it. But I am interested in the conversation about Cuba. But you guys aren't. I don't feel like any of you guys are making an argument right now. Okay. The battle over the Nimitz Singwa's face. Ace always comes in swinging. Yeah. I lost on that one? What? Oh, okay, never mind. I was at 21 half. Oh, that's right. Okay, so let's talk about that. But I asked you a question, and you didn't respond to it. The question is, have you seen the my little stats profile thing? So like, let's come in here. Let's say 30-minute time periods. Okay. I think for us, at least for me, I'm usually don't necessarily want to be in a scalp for more than 30 minutes, right? You know what? I really want to trade the treasury right now, but I'm looking at it and it's like, I don't know what it's doing. Stop run chewed you, something like that. Well, no, I mean, it went higher and I was shorting it, so. I think the reality on that one is that I'm not being very disciplined. I'm kind of just freeballing it, and really I don't have a very good reason to believe that it's going to move up or down. I'm not entirely sure why it is happening the way that it is. We'll turn off the log. Okay. Ace, has anyone else had trouble with Ninja? I did, actually, when I started. Seems like it's okay now, though. Okay. So, have you seen this histogram? I'm gonna make it all big. Actually, even more than that. How about that? Okay, so what do we got here? We have the average range of a 30-minute bar is what this is, okay? So, most bars, most 30-minute time periods, they're trade more than 12 ticks. This is a number of ticks, right? Most 30-minute time period bars are larger than 12 ticks. Now, there's pretty standard distribution coming down for the most part. There's a little bit of noise, but there is around 30, just at 35, 36. That seems significant to me, right? 35, 36, there's like a little bit of a plateau, right? So it appears that if you're getting a good move and it goes 36 ticks, that there's a possibility that it's going to back up for a little bit. And then here's all of these other ones, right? And then around 40 to 50, there's kind of another plateau area. So that's 10 points, right? So there's like 8 points, there's a little bit of a slightly less chance of it going. And then 10 points, there's slightly less chance of it going, right? Note though, it has a very fat tail, doesn't it? Look at that tail. Look at that tail. There's the distribution. It has a high degree of kurtosis. There's a most, and also note that this is like on an exponential time scale. I think I changed it so that I can switch between the two. I don't know if. Yeah, I don't think I have it set in this one, though. I think it was a different one where I added it. but this is exponential. So just note that the number of bars where it's within 12 is like exponentially higher than the ones that there's like 100 ticks, right? It's much rare. But this tail is very, very long. It is very, very long, and it is very, very thick. It is very high. Okay. So that kind of gives you an idea of the statistical properties of it. But what I was discussing that the other day was, okay, if a large meta order comes in, there is a limit on how far it can push it. What are those limits? And those limits are enforced by the market liquidity, right? So the reason why you're going to get those differences is like, okay, if it's like normal market action and somebody comes in and buys things and there's nothing crazy happening, then the chances are that you're not going to be able to push it much more than 12 ticks, right? So here, if you're trading and you're going for 12 ticks and you get it, that's pretty darn good. You should feel good about your trade, right? If you get 10 points, that's like, something's going on. There's a lot more activity. There's a lot more volume coming in there, right? And then for it to go beyond that, you're talking about like really crazy things. So that was kind of the point that I was trying to make that day, was that if we have our little formula, oops, not that. So remember, what was it? C times the spread, which doesn't really matter because it's just one tick for us all the time in the ES, right? So we just say C times the square root of the size of the meta order over the volume equals, right? But in this case, I think you could come back and you could say equals 12. Yeah. And then depending on which variable it is that you're trying to figure out, you could go and look at the market and find this information and calculate them out. For instance, if you wanted to estimate the C. If you wanted to estimate the C, we could come in and we could say, okay, what is the average volume imbalance, right? We could say, well, there's 1,000 contracts in balance and there's X thousand, traded. Let's say 10,000 traded, right? 110. So the square root of 0.1. So 12 divided by the square root of 0.1. So Ace, I don't know what the deal was. When I started NinjaTrader up this morning, it had issues and it like hung, and I just end tasked to it and everything was fine. I would go and look and be like, do you see at the top of the chart it's saying like loading or something like that? Like that's what I would be looking for. But if you're having a problem like that, you just restart. I'd kill to have a price line indicator. You mean like a little line that just shows you, that goes across from the current price? You can do that automatically, right? There's probably a couple of ways to do it depending on how you want it to work, but yeah, just a dashed line. So I think, what's the best way to do that? Is it that you just have to have a price? Is it that you just have to put the price line indicator on it? Price line. Yep, there it is right there. Show ask line, show bid line, show last line. Percentage of the chart. There it is. He has it. It's just not loading. Oh, well, I gotcha. Oh, okay. Interesting. Treasuries seem awfully indecisive today, wouldn't you say? E-mini's been rotating quite a bit here too. Yeah, have you tried F5ing the chart? Another thing is I would always have one of those output windows, NinjaScript output windows out there to see if any errors got output. What's the news on Lake Mead? I haven't heard anything new, but they are concerned that if this drought continues, that they won't even be able to generate power. I think my eye is calmed down now. Somehow I knew you'd say that. Special situations tweets lockdowns harm society and health more than the virus does in aggregate. I think they're going to make a strong argument. Yes, I think they make a strong argument. To the thing we were talking about earlier, when you look at the protests in Cuba and in South Africa, and let's just assume for a moment that the argument that these wouldn't have happened without the pandemic are true, you have to look at it and say, okay, are the number of lives that you save from locking down for the virus really worth a complete political collapse of your country? You know? There's a temperature threshold? Well, the thing that you got to remember is that the higher up the water is, the more the pressure is down at the bottom, and thus the faster they can turn the turbine. When it gets too low, it gets to a point where you're just not getting enough water pressure to really generate power. I don't even know what's going on in South Africa. What is going on there? And is there any? There is. So, what I'm about to say is not a 100% accurate one-to-one comparison. Okay, you really got to understand that, because what I'm about to say is gonna be really triggering to a lot of people politically. Okay, I'm just trying to set up a theoretical situation that would give you an idea of what's kind of going on over there by explaining a similar situation that could happen in the United States so you would understand, okay? I'm not saying that these guys are similar, okay? Imagine if a year from now, let's say Donald Trump doesn't run for president again for starters, okay? Donald Trump doesn't run for president again, but they continue to investigate him and everything, and there is now a court case. They want him to testify or something of that nature, and Donald Trump refuses. Of course he would refuse. He would refuse to participate in the process whatsoever, okay? And so he gets a contempt of court charge and is thrown in prison. And then as a result, all of the Trump supporters go out and start looting. Okay. I don't think that would really happen that way in the United States. I don't think that Donald Trump supporters would loot in that fashion. But that is essentially what is going on in South Africa. Okay. This Zuma guy, he was president, and he was kind of like, when they got rid of the apartheid government, he kind of took over. But he was very corrupt, and eventually South Africans got tired of it and got rid of him, and he was replaced. And now several years later, there is corruption trials and so forth, and he's not cooperating, so they threw him in prison. Well, you got to remember that there's like really strong tribal identity politics going on there that's way stronger than any sort of thing that you'd see here in the United States, okay? He was Zulu, which is basically like the poorer areas, okay? And everybody in his tribe is really upset that they're going after him after the fact, okay? I guess they don't care that he was corrupt. And so they're rioting. Now, something interesting about the situation in South Africa, they've been like attacking distribution centers and stuff. It's not like they just go and like trash the mall and all of the local businesses. They're like going after like infrastructure stuff, which is really weird, right? Like that's not normal. I don't know what's causing that, but there's got to be something else going on underneath the surface that we don't understand, because they're like destroying infrastructure. It's having a really it's really taking a toll on South Africa, and people are really seriously thinking that it could become a failed state here. Like they've called in the military and everything, and it's still going on. Like if this continues to go on for much longer, it is going to become a failed state or a civil war. Powell will be testifying here at the bottom of the hour, right? Yeah, about 3 minutes to the open. I don't know. If I lived in South Africa, I would get out, but I don't have the kind of loyalty to the country of, to that land that I do like the United States. Because on the other hand, if that sort of thing was happening in the United States, I wouldn't leave. I would fix it. So I don't know. I suppose if that was happening in the United States, if that was happening in my city, I would move cities, but I wouldn't move outside of the United States. Man, even like you get like a pretty decent long, and it comes back. The being very much mean reversion in the S&P 500 at the moment. I wonder what they're going to do off of the open. Thanks, Win. 2 minutes. If you haven't hit the like button, please do so now. I really should spend more time on that. I was thinking about that yesterday because I came across a TikTok account of this guy saying, oh, like I wanted to do YouTube and then nobody thought it was possible, and then it happened. And he was trying to make it out like this inspirational story, but I'm like, well, yeah, like you can go viral on YouTube and it can just be like completely random. It wasn't so an inspirational story to me. But I looked at his channel and I was like, I was like surprised that it had the number of viewers that it did. It's like he must not be getting the viewers from just the YouTube algorithm itself. Like there must be something more to his strategies, because like his thumbnails and video titles were not the things that I understood to be effective. So it was kind of a little weird. But then the other thing that was weird was that he was still in like like you have 100,000 subscribers, like you got to be rolling in dough, and he was claiming that he was making $500,000 this year. Now login failed with NinjaTrader 8? How is that? Cool. Well, I'm happy that I got my target there. I suppose I'm supposed to leave it on, so I'll leave it on. What does it say when you try and log in? There's got to be something else going on there that we're missing, Ace. Anyways, I was watching, it was like he was making 500,000, and I'm like, why are you still streaming in like an empty room in what looks like an empty room in an apartment? Like, why aren't you reinvesting back into your channel? It was so weird to me. I thought it was so weird. I just heard the chime. Maybe it's okay this time. Many folks think that a God belief is baked into our DNA, but it turns out many cultures have not had a God belief. I wouldn't say that a belief in God is baked into our DNA. I would say that religion and ceremony is, or rather that people tend to congregate in tribes of about maximum 200 people. Then that tribe will tend to have some overarching belief about the world and morality that is common to them, that is central to their life, and that is the way people tend to go. And if they don't do it with a belief in God, they'll do it with something else. But they need something that like has the larger significance to them, you know? Oh, you see the price sign, you fix it. Okay. Okay. This is a good news, except for I missed this move up. Yeah, it's okay. There's be plenty more action here today, I think. Interesting point in Seth. Even atheist scientists have proposed that religion is sort of innate to humanity, like the potential to basically apply labels to things in order to try and understand. Well, yeah, like just look at this South Africa situation. Like, this guy was corrupt. I guess he's not cooperating. Do the people from his tribe care? Well, it seems like they don't believe that he's corrupt, but right, is that tribal thinking causes these things, and there's good things and bad things about it, right? The good thing is that group cohesion really increases your survival. Sometimes there are situations where ignoring one of your own members' failings it will be beneficial to you and your group's cause in the long run. And so that's what tends to happen. But the key thing is I don't know if it has to be the concept of God, but it does. There does have to be a belief that it has more than just how do you put it? You know, it. Like, I don't think that you can build a religion around 1 + 1 = 2. Okay, like sure that's a true fact, but can you make the 1 + 1 = 2 cult? Like, there has to be some sort of greater significance, like meaning, right? I think that's the key point, is that people look for meaning in their lives. Can you think about a philosophy where finding meaning in your life is an essential part of it? Like, even nihilism or existentialism are like, even existentialism is like, well, there is no meaning to life, but you can create meaning for your life. You can decide to choose something and that be the meaning, right? But I think that there's this implicit acknowledgement that humans have an innate need for meaning in their life, right? It's just like me. Like, I can go through one of the things that's hard is that, like, I want the YouTube channel to be successful. I think that it could be a lot more successful than it is. If it was more successful, like this other guy I was talking about, had hundreds of thousands of subscribers, you know, that wouldn't, like, for some of these guys, I mean, he was young. That's probably like everything. For me, probably wouldn't change my day-to-day life very much. If I was making tons of money like that, I would just invest it into other things, and I wouldn't really change my daily schedule much at all. I have things the way that I want them to be right now, you know? But that's kind of the thing, is that, like, I've already done you've climbed up the hierarchy of needs. What do you need? You need purpose. And what's the purpose? Is your purpose to just make as much money as possible in life? I don't understand. That to me doesn't give me that greater significance, right? By helping other people, it's not necessarily going to be helping other people like everybody becomes successful traders. I wish that was the case, but we know that most people aren't going to be successful traders. But understanding the markets, just increasing people's understanding of the markets, is like a really important thing for our society, right? So there's that purpose that I pull out through it, right? And our chat has been really good in the past. Why? Because we have this greater purpose. That we understand that our purpose is to understand markets, that we serve a role in the society that, even though maybe it's undervalued and we don't get compensated for it as much as we would like sometimes, that it's a necessary thing and that it has benefit to everybody, right? And that's what creates the group of cohesion in a way that I can come in and like really argue really viciously with people about specific issues, because those issues aren't central to the premise of the channel, right? In fact, it's arguing those things is, though, like arguing things so that we can understand the world better is central to the purpose of the channel, right? Do you see what I mean? The whole thing is, if this is the way that people behave, how do you create a culture that utilizes that part of human nature for good? Because far too often it is turned into a bad thing. In that sense, I think that what Seth is kind of saying to us explains why when stocks make predicted moves, everyone screams it's hedge manipulation, whether it's true or not. Well, I think like there's this thing like, so it really is a good point, because for some people, because they do not have that religion or whatever the deal is, they're attaching to different things. You can see it in these 20-year-olds, can't you? It's everywhere. It's just people on the internet attaching themselves to causes and let's not even call it causes. Let's say hobbies. People attaching themselves to hobbies in a way that seems very illogical, right? I'll give you a better example. Anime culture. You've seen some of this stuff about anime culture. There are certain things that you can say, okay, did the Powell just say something? I don't know. There are certain things that subjects in anime culture, like the depiction of really young girls in some anime shows, right? That like really get people worked up. Like, to me, the amount of vitriol that I've seen in Reddit threads on those sorts of things make zero sense. So a lot of the arguments that they make overall don't make any sense either, but a lot of the vitriol in particular just makes zero sense to me. Lucas says not good action. I know. I that really was a move, like a news move, but I'm not seeing any I don't know. I did see 9 minutes ago Fed's Bullard urges tapering to commence. I don't know. Patrick Rooney retweets Dave Lauer. Now imagine how much tighter spreads would be for the entire market if that retail flow was executed on exchange. Hell yes. So much true. So much true. Seth is a weeb. Well, I wouldn't say I'm a weeb, but it's like, it's everywhere now. You can't get away from it. I'll watch maybe some of the like really highly rated anime, but some of the stuff I don't get how people watch it. It's just, I think you could only enjoy it if you were really just into the genre itself, because a lot of these shows seem like are shows for the sake of being anime. You know what I mean? I digress. So yeah, has anime become religion for some people? I think so. And yeah, people have done it, and their religion is GameStop. And you can see how it acts, right? If they see a piece of information, if your religion is GameStop is going to make me rich by it going up, then if GameStop doesn't go up, then that is a fundamental disconnect between reality and your world's purpose. How do you reconcile that? Well, they come in and they say it's manipulation. This is like the only way that you can reconcile that cognitive dissonance is either one, you have to completely reconstruct your religion, or you have to come up with a reason why it's manipulation, right? And this is where most conspiracy theories originate from. So I was saying the other thing with like Cuba is like there are people. I don't know if that's why Keller, for instance, was making the argument he was earlier or not, but I have seen people online making this argument that what's going on in Cuba is just like the U.S. government interfering in Cuban international affairs. Well, why would that be? Because if your religion is communism, and then you go and you find out that one of the communist country out there that people don't like living in that communist country, how do you reconcile that with your religion? Right? You have to say, well, it's the American government's fault. So always some sort of a conspiracy theory. Same with the Donald Trump. A lot of people let Make America Great Again become their religion. And so when Donald Trump lost, or appeared to be losing, like honestly, when I look at the last election, I remember I was telling you guys like in October that like unless Donald Trump, was it October? Yeah, it was. It was like maybe September, October before the election that I started saying, unless Donald Trump makes a really big strategic change here, he's not going to win. Right. And that was around the time that I really started to see like truly conspiratorial stuff happen or come out amongst the Trumpians. But it was even before that, because it was like Donald Trump came in office and then it wasn't all sunshines and rainbows and not everything that they wanted to have happen was happening. How do you explain that? Well, it must be the deep state, right? Do we want to have Powell speaking right now? Well, we could pull him up. I am, now that I've seen the action that we've been seeing and turn my algorithm off, I can just sit down and say, okay. Oh, by the way, I need to, I'm not a huge fan. The way that Ninja Trader shows like your account stuff, I was looking at the account stuff and I had some problems with the way that they did things.
Block by.
My oh my. The treasury really spiked up there, huh? I think that there could still be, well, they wouldn't even be at the overnight high if they were to get to 26. So, to give you an idea of how much further they could go if there really is going to be like a strong trend to come in here. I'm not so sure if that's what we're seeing, though. I think that this is probably more just trading, especially since it was so choppy before. And it's only going up now after the ES opened and Powell is speaking. That's why so many people who leave one religion turn to another religion rather than becoming atheists, like jumping ship from GME to AMC. Yeah, well, or like I was saying, they treat atheism like their religion. Right? Like honestly, think about it. If you don't have, so like I would express it in like the way that Ace does, for instance, right? Where Ace says we want people to have as many true beliefs as possible and as a few false beliefs as possible. And that's kind of like becomes his religion. Right? So when I question that premise, I get a pretty good argument out of him, right? But people are going to try and find a way for purpose in their life. And you just kind of got to ask yourself, like, is the purpose that I'm deriving really making me make effective decisions, essentially, right? Depends on you. Well, I think I already gave a pretty good definition of what I'm calling religion here, right? Well, you can't derive purpose in life from science? Sure, well, sure you can. You absolutely can, right? You can come in and you can say, it is my purpose to advance the cause of science because it saves lives and makes people's lives better. It is. I have to say that making your religion science, I think, works a lot better than a lot of other things that you could be making your religion, like lollies or whatever. Uzi says, oof. Wait, I'm not sure I quite understand what Ace is saying here. Let me have it read it out. I should be using the text to spec.
Wouldn't let an invisible friend pick their major, or career, or spouse freak out if you suggest that they shouldn't let their friend pick their purpose.
Who's lets their friend pick their purpose? Kyler says,
Kellag 73 says Neil deGrasse Tyson has also been problematic recently.
well, yeah, sure. So like, so this is where there's an issue, is that like, the religion has become the understanding of science rather than the pursuit of science, right? I would argue that here on this channel that our religion, if we're going to say that we have one, is the pursuit of trading and the pursuit of understanding the markets. And the reason that can be effective is because we can have a religious zeal of trying to be successful with trading without that having to turn into a religious zeal behind a particular strategy or whatever the deal is, because since the pursuit is the effective trading, then all that matters is that we find something, is that when we're doing our trading that it works and it's effective, right? And it should be the same with science, that the religion should be the pursuit of science, which would mean using the scientific method, finding new truths through science, or confirming and falsifying hypotheses, right? But there might be a fundamental problem with that. I'm not so sure that that's the way that people tend to think about religion. How do you get them into that mode? Because you can definitely see that even though that's what science is supposed to be, that people have this tendency to stray from that and instead just say, this is what the science says today. This is the dogma, and they hold to it, and it creates problems. There are situations where real science has been hampered or prevented because of people's dogmatic beliefs about what the science already says, right? To the point, like, I really truly believe that this is the case of what's going on in climate science right now. It has become such a foregone conclusion to many people. It really has become their religious doctrine that global warming is happening and that it's going to kill humanity. I don't know if all scientists think that it's going to kill humanity, but that they all think that global warming is happening and that it's man-made. To the point that any scientist that comes in and wants to do research that could possibly falsify that conclusion, it's like not even allowed. Is that really true science? It's not. And I'm not saying that it's not human cause. I'm just saying that if a scientist wants to go and do some research on that subject, he should be allowed to. everyone needs to make sacrifices except for China and India. It looks to me like China does actually do stuff regarding the climate, believe it or not. It's just that, like, if you look at their take, it's we're going to take advantage of the situation and grow our economy and become the dominant world power, and then we'll become, clean. Please tell me when a scientist wasn't allowed to do science. Okay, so for instance, before the big Paris summit, there was models that were being used to show that there was climate change. And those models were used as the basis for what the targets and so forth needed to be. And it turned out that there was a flaw in those models, like a programmatic flaw, and that when this guy reran those models with the correct information, it showed the effects to be significantly less than what they were using. And when he tried to notify and change it, he received pushback, and he wasn't able. They didn't change it. They went forward on that conference with the incorrect information, and then later he had to leak that data and that story to the media. Think you're getting politics mixed up with science? That's something that happened where science was hampered because of this political dogma. Happened. I mean, there was a scientist where his scientific data was influenced by the, and I mean, it goes beyond that. It's like, come on. You go and try and do a study that shows that global warming is not man-made, and see if you get funding for it. See if you go get funding for it. Their scientific tests showed that male circumcision creates severe trauma that affects the amygdala and frontal and temporal lobes. Well, that's interesting if that's true. But it is true. My claim is that because of politics, it's not just politics. I would say it's because of the dogma surrounding a current scientific understanding that further research on the falsifying that hypothesis has been prevented. Yeah. Absolutely has. More to the point, that there's been well, I guess that's not really caused by religion. Never mind. This is a different issue. I was going to try and bring it back to UFOs, but as a great opinion, it's not true. It is true. And I just gave you a very specific example of where it happened. A friend from NASA said poles are shifting. They are. Oh, do you know about this live action? Oh, I think it's one of the most interesting pieces of science that has emerged in the last decade or two. So I'm going to try and explain this. I'm going to go off on the tangent because I find it so interesting, and it actually is. He's right. It is happening, or at least our understanding is that it is happening. So what are we talking about? So here is the Earth, okay, and there's the crust, and then there's the core of the Earth, and then there's all of this lava. And we've always been told that this lava turns like this, right? And that's what causes the magnetism. That's also what causes the continents to drift, right? But it's also what causes magnetism is these flows where when the magnet gets close to the Earth's center, it becomes hotter, and so then it moves away from out here, right? Well, what these guys did was they started generating these computer models to try and model how those magna flows underneath of the Earth's crust should behave. Okay? And what he would find is when he did his model, after it would be stable for a while, and then something would happen and it would become unstable, and the whole polarity of the system would flip. And he was like, well, that can't be right. That's weird. So they really went into it and tried to figure out everything that was going wrong with it and everything, but they couldn't find anything wrong with it. And so eventually they started, very quickly, I guess, they said, maybe this is actually a thing. So then they started to go and look for evidence of if it had actually happened. And they did. So they could go and they could look at rocks, that like lava rocks that cooled, at different times. And you can tell what the polarity of the Earth was at the time that the rocks cooled by analyzing the rock. And what they started to find was that if they went back in time far back enough, that basically the time that the models said that it would happen, they found that yes, in fact, you do get polarity shifts in the Earth's magnetic field. So it will turn into a situation within, I think, 200 years where there won't just be one North Pole. There will actually be multiple poles. And then eventually it will flip. And every compass created before that time will point the wrong way because the polarity will flip. And also during that time, it also affects the Earth's magnetic fields and the way that it pushes away, protects the Earth from radiation. So it's a problem because during that time, cancer rates will probably be higher. Really, really super interesting thing. But science as a body of work becomes politicized and gets treated as the unalterable truth. Exactly. You're exactly right. And why does it happen? Why the whole thing is why does it happen? It's because of the human nature surrounding religion and tribal beliefs. Right. So the whole question, like the whole philosophical question that I continue to ask, and the experiment is, can we design a religion that counters that effect? How do you set up life purposes if we assume that we could pick anything that we want? Okay, what kind of purpose do we give people so that we don't fall into those kinds of problems? And I think it's and it's very pertinent to what we do as trading. Yazid says, hello, I'm new here. Welcome. Right? It's very pertinent to what we do in trading because it's a really big problem if your tribal beliefs result in bad trades. Right? And we see that, right? People will develop a religious devotion to an indicator or method of trading, which will never work because what we understand about markets now is that edges, any kind of like well-known edge, is going to get arbitraged out of the markets and then isn't there anymore. Thanks, family. There you go. Right? So the religion on the YouTube channel can't be a certain kind of analysis. That's what most people in this space do, though, is they say technical analysis is the way or fundamental analysis is the way. And I've turned it to what we want to do is understand the markets. I can't necessarily guarantee that you'll have success trading, but what we want to do is we want to understand markets as well as we can. The no way is the way. It's a real toughie. I mean, theoretically, you should be able to find a inefficiency in the market and take advantage of it, and just if you size up right, the market won't notice and then it won't disappear. That's what Renaissance technologies does. But even over there, I'm kind of getting some hints that even they are starting to have some problems with that. So the dogma thinking is the problem itself. Nothing should be seen as always true. Eric Eberhardt says, yeah. Well, that's the problem, though, is that that's just the way that people tend to behave, even if they're cognizant of it. Wouldn't I be prone to that too? I don't know. I've extended the olive branch on understanding that science as a body of work can be treated as a religion. I hope that you will understand my corollary that science as a methodology is not the religion of atheists like Jordan Peterson would claim. I think you're probably right. I know the scientific method is an interesting, from a philosophical point of view, I think is an interesting discussion in and of itself, because it doesn't hold for everything. If I could say so, we hold the scientific method up as like this paragon of understanding the world, but there are situations where the scientific method breaks down. So, for instance, social sciences, right? Social sciences, you really cannot apply the scientific method in the same way that you do in physics. And even within physics, there are areas of physics that kind of exist beyond the standard scientific method, like theoretical physics, right? Because that's much more about developing models of the universe and then seeing how well the universe conforms to that. You can't develop a control and an experiment in all situations, and ergo, in those situations, you can't apply the scientific method in the same way, right? But you're right. It shouldn't be. I don't think that it is the religion. I think that for atheists, the thing that's really weird about it is that I feel that for most atheists, like the religion becomes trying to convince everybody else. Like you get what I mean? Like, just because your one purpose is to understand physics as well as possible doesn't mean that should be everybody else's purpose in life, right? Because most people couldn't give a crap. Okay, so there's another interesting thing. You know what? I never put 2 and 2 together on this one. So when you talk about a scientific hypothesis, right? We come in and we say a hypothesis is like a claim about something that will happen. And then we try and design an experiment with a control and an experimental thing where we change a variable, and try to test if we get the result that we would expect based on our hypothesis, right? And then we come out and we say things that have been tested well enough, then it can become a law, like the law of gravity, right? I suppose that's one way of looking at it, but I have since learned that there's a much more effective way of looking at it. A law is an observation. A law is an observation, and the hypothesis is an explanation for that observation. So, the law of gravity, we know it's a law because you're always going to see that observation. Like, it is an observation that is so consistent that we have every reason to believe they will always hold, right? Like the law of gravity. The law of gravity is that, well, as it started out, was that a heavy object will fall to the ground, right? That's the law of gravity. It's an observation. And whether you believe the observation or not, does not make you immune from the effects, right? So to the example that you were making there, what was it that he said? What was he saying? Oh, so if I jump off a bridge, we all know gravity will pull me down and kill me, and someone who claims otherwise, saying they believe they can fly, is basically a joke. Right. Because you're not immune to the law of gravity, right? But based on our understanding of what a law is now, it's fallacious to state that just because you don't believe in global warming doesn't mean that you won't be harmed by its effects, because there is no law of global warming. Global warming is a hypothesis. Global warming is, we have seen a certain change in temperatures during this certain time. It's not consistent enough to say that it's a law, but we're still making up a hypothesis for our observation, right? No, but you can change the explanation as what goes on, as Einstein did. Yeah, different hypothesis. So you come up with a law, and then you come up with a hypothesis to explain why that happens. And then as we get more data and we understand things more and more, we can come up with better and better hypotheses that we think are more accurate to what's actually going on, right? Right. Understand that scientific laws are still considered theory. Scientific theory describes phenomena. Well, I don't. So you got to think of it as that a law, it describes an observation, not why the observation happens. Okay. So there are laws in markets. This is why this is important, right? So the law of square root impact in limit order book financial markets is a law. In every instance that we have ever observed, the impact that a large meta order has on the market follows a square root law based on the square root of the size of the meta order over the total volume traded during that period. It is a law. It's been such a consistent observation that we consider it to be a law. I would. Some people think that volatility, that realized volatility always being less than implied volatility, or on average being less than implied volatility, is maybe a law too. I'm not so sure if that one is for sure a law, but by the effing dip is also another law. The investment community certainly treats the idea that over a large enough time frame that equities, over a 30-year time frame, that equities will always go up. They sure treat that like a law, don't they? I'm a little concerned that one is maybe not a law. I'm a little concerned that at some point society and technology will develop to a point where that won't happen anymore. Man, I can still feel this contact. What's the deal? It must just be getting old. I'm sure that's what you really want to see, is a guy touching his eye. Did you not listen to what I said, Ace? The law of gravity isn't the theory of gravity all grown up. What I said wasn't accurate. I mean, there's a way of looking at it like that we could say, well, objects follow the ground, hence why, and then can look at gravity and then I mean, you can see an observation, and then your theory can be that this observation will always hold given certain conditions, right? And then it becomes a law. But I don't think you listened to the whole rest of the thing there, right? I think that you heard that first bit and then you completely tuned out the rest, right? Because then what did I say? I said a law is actually a observation. A law is an observation that we know given certain conditions always holds. That's what a law is. Okay, what is a law then, Ace? Enlighten us. We'll wait. We can wait. So, man, I don't. He says there's a theory of gravity, germ theory, evolution. They best explain the data we have. If there's a mathematical formula to something like gravity, we call it a law. Okay, prove that. I don't think that's too different from what I'm saying now. There's no law of evolution since it can't be modeled mathematically. Well, that's... Okay, but there's no law of global warming, and that is something that you should be able to model mathematically. Actually, like, this is the whole issue that I have with the climate change debate, is that the whole thing is based on models, and these models have not been proven to be laws, right? Like, we're getting into the area of modeling where our ability to really predict what is going to happen is quite limited. So there's all these things like gravity and physics that act in a consistent way every time, or like they're linear models. The hypothesis and the expected result are basically one-to-one, and any deviation that you have between those two is probably due to measurement inaccuracies, right? Versus modeling the weather, which is something completely different. Like we can model weather, and we've actually become very, very good at it, but our prediction, it does not predict exactly what is going to happen. Like, exactly, there's a range of error in there. No one needs a law of global warming to decide it's the best explanation. Okay, but if somebody doesn't think that that's the correct explanation, and they want to design conduct research that they believe will prove that will falsify that hypothesis, why can't they be allowed to do that research? who isn't allowed to do research? Holy crap, have you never listened to these guys that are there are a number of scientists, I would say a dozen or so scientists out there saying that they don't believe that humans are the primary cause of global warming that we've seen, and they all complain about not being allowed to do their research. And again, I already pointed to a specific example where a person's scientific research was not allowed to be released. Essentially. Neil Tyson is a provocateur. I think there's a fundamental problem with becoming famous in this kind of issue, because it seems to me that to become truly famous in the way that like Neil deGrasse Tyson does, there has to be a particular, like you have to say things that appeal to the people's tribal nature, tribal dogmatic beliefs, in order to become popular. And so you end up with these things like Neil deGrasse Tyson, where he's going to behave in a way from time to time that hampers true science, because that's the nature of what you have to do in order to become successful as a social media influencer. If you have so many folks who can't do research, it shouldn't be hard to find. Well, I could go and find the name of the person if I want. So not sure what world you live in where you think no one is allowed to research their heart's content. I'm sorry, Ace, but I think that you live in a fantasy land if you think that you can just research whatever you want and you'll get the money for it. There are plenty of things, okay? Try and do research on IQ differences between races and see if you get any funding for it. It would never happen. Right? Of course, it would be kind of dumb research, because what we understand about the statistics of IQ suggests that it would be a fruitless venture, but I digress. They're not going to give you the funding for it. Money is a different color of horse. No, it's not. It's not. We're talking about the way that the entire scientific community runs. Okay, if your claim is that folks have a hard time with funding, then yes, I agree. Okay, there you go. Then I'm right. Cool, thank you. Here's a hypothesis. What's really going on here is that Ace really strongly believes that global warming is man-made, and therefore any argument that suggests that it might not be man-made, and I'm not making that assertion here, but anyone that any kind of argument that could possibly lead to that conclusion must, as of a necessity, be wrong. Because otherwise, Seth wouldn't be leading me down that trap. That's what's going on there. Not being allowed to research something, or you can research it, but I mean, so first of all, certain things require funding in order to research. Okay, so to say that, well, you're allowed to, you just don't have, that's kind of like, that's a really dumb argument, right? We all know that there are certain things that we can't research because nobody will fund it. Okay. But then the other side of that is that there are instances where people have done research and it's sound research, or they believe it's sound research, and they can't get it published. That also happens. They won't let me research what's going on in here. My understanding is actually, I saw a report where they basically said that because there's so much interest around Area 51 that they don't really use it anymore. that the real research is going on in some other place. I saw an article where they even like listed the places where it was actually happening. I was like, wow. Not true. Like, so here's my problem, Ace. Like, here's my contention here. Like my larger contention here. Okay. You are really bad at arguing. I'm sorry. I'm not saying that to be mean, but I'm saying that because for me to come in and I say, okay, I'll make an assertion or I'll propose a theory, and then your response is not true, is like the lamest, most boring, most ineffective thing that you could ever possibly say is just contradicted and then say, right? Like, here would be an effective argument would be, well, that can't be true because here is a piece of evidence that falsifies that hypothesis, right? But you never do that. Like, I don't get why you would even bother typing that's not true. Yeah, he contradicts, not argues. It really is. It's really frustrating because I'm like, think of it from my perspective, Ace. Like, I'm sitting over here. I said something, and then I'm waiting for Ace to respond and to see if I can work out like what he really thinks or where something that we're saying might be wrong or whatever. And then all he says is not true. Like, oh, okay. He doesn't agree. Like, it doesn't advance the conversation. If you have good data with proper protocol, it will get published. If it meets peer review, that's not true. So there are instances where I believe that people have good research and it didn't get published. It would probably be really hard for me to go back and find those stories, though, for you, unfortunately. But I can certainly recall many times where people have done this research, and it's like, well, so like let's take it a step back. You would say, for instance, there was no fraud in the election, right? You say there's no fraud in the election, and I would say, well, the reason you say there is no fraud in the election is because you didn't allow them to look properly. Right? Isn't that's the argument isn't that the same argument? Right? And then when I type something, you don't read it. There's a lot of things that you're saying and you just don't make an actual argument out there. So like you're saying, who has the energy to spend an hour correcting your misunderstanding about how science works, how peer review works, and how the difference between laws and hypotheses? So the fundamental problem with what you're stating here is that you're arguing that it doesn't work like that. But the reality is that, can there be a situation where there was a piece of research that was researched and it should have been published and it wasn't? And could there be one instance of that in all of the thousands of studies that are conducted every year? Because to falsify that particular thing, you would have to go in and you would have to look at every piece of research that has ever been conducted, and then all of the pieces of research that didn't get published, and look at why they didn't get published, and then see if there was an instance of a piece of research that should have been published, and determine that it should have been published based off of a certain set of criteria that we say these are the standards that it should meet. And then if we find one of those, then you're wrong. You understand the problem with the argument that you're making? It's like a really silly position to take, because there are people out there claiming, and it's not really something that I spend a ton of time on, so I'm sorry I don't have citations for you at the moment, okay? But there are definitely people out there claiming that they're not being allowed to do their research, or that they are not getting published because of it. And it was, but that's why I wanted to turn it into, it's even more silly. There is a big conspiracy to suppress scientific progress. I think that it's not a big conspiracy, Ace. Now what you're doing is you're making assumptions. You're creating straw man arguments. You're saying, you believe that there is a big conspiracy to prevent global warming study from being done, but it's not a big conspiracy. Like the whole contention here is that there is a structural problem within the scholarly research community that is preventing certain kinds of research from being done, and it's absolutely true. Right? But since that's not one that I'm like really well prepared to come in and talk about, let's talk about the election instead, because I know that you would make the same argument on there. And I would say there was fraud in the 2020 election, that on some level there was fraud, and that we were not allowed to do the proper investigation to determine the extent and impact of that fraud. And the argument that you will make is you'll say no, because none of these claims had merit or anything. But what they're doing now is they're going back and they're doing this research, particularly in Georgia, and they are finding quite a bit of fraud. Thousands of votes, situations where these rolls were run through multiple times. Was it widespread? There was enough fraud in the election to have changed the results. It's impossible for us to know the exact impact without doing the research that we're not being allowed to do. But the amount of fraud that we have uncovered so far is enough that it could change the result. He says, oh dear, thousands of votes must be the Illuminati. So here again, you're making, okay, so do you have links for that, Seth? So if you want to hear more about what you're finding out in Georgia, go and watch Tucker Carlson's monologue yesterday. Tucker Carlson did a big, long thing on what has been coming out of Georgia. And because these guys were, they requested the legal documents and did the analysis on this, and then a newspaper, who it was actually quite a liberal newspaper, like went and like verified all of their work, and it was several thousands of votes. And it's so funny. Ace says, "Oh dear, thousands of votes," but you realize that this election, in some of those areas, that these were things where I think 15,000 votes was the difference, right? Yeah, there you go. Here again is an Exhibit B of Ace is really bad at arguing. So what I just did was I made a assertion that that fraud has been uncovered in the election, and that fraud is significant enough to have possibly changed the results. And instead of saying, well, that's not true because here is something that falsifies the piece of evidence that you are presenting, instead you say, well, if it came from Tucker Carlson, then it must not be true. So you're using a logical fallacy, which is attacking the messenger, to try and make your argument, instead of making an actual logical argument based on facts and evidence. So again, like what I see from you over and over and over again is that you think that the arguments that you are making are all based on logic, and you think that you know what's going on, but in almost every case, you either almost immediately use a logical fallacy to try and make your point, or you start making assertions that you wouldn't make if you had actually done any research and actually understood the issue. Do you see? And I'm saying this to you in the hopes that you'll go home tonight and you'll go and you'll watch Tucker Carlson's monologue and come back with a better argument. Because the argument that you just gave me is really shitty. I wish the market were as predictable as these debate tactics. It is true that you have your tied behind your back, but I'm saying that just the stuff that you're typing in is really ineffective. I don't know. So here's the thing. I think I'm good at this. It's always, whenever you want to say I'm good at this thing or I'm this way, you always got to be careful about it, because of course there's always going to be an egotistical thing, right? Like, how do you know that what you think you're good at, that you're actually good at or you're bad at it, right? Because your own view of that thing is so biased and so forth, right? But here's what I have found. I am really good at going into a chat and forming that one sentence that is going to completely deconstruct the thing that they're saying and like grab their attention. I do it all the time. I have gotten really good at going on Reddit and making that one comment that they absolutely hate. Because here's the thing, is if I go on Reddit and I say something that is like objectively not true. Okay. So if I say, if the thread is, let's say this subject, for instance, if the story was about this election fraud, the null hypothesis for Reddit is that there was no election fraud, right? So I'm pretty good at coming in and pointing out the big logical fallacy in the argument in one sentence that gets them to downvote me really, really hard. Because if I came in and I said, well, the Illuminati clearly had a meeting to determine that Joe Biden was the winner, and so that's how we know that there would be fraud, because that's how the Illuminati works, right? If I say that on Reddit, everybody's going to go in and say, well, this guy is just crazy. Like, they're not interested in reading that, right? People aren't interested in reading that. And so those kinds of comments don't actually tend to get that many downvotes in reality. Like those ones, they'll get like 5 downvotes unless the piece of information that they're giving is a piece of misinformation that was like widely believed at one point and has been disproven. Then you'll get a lot of people that will downvote it. But if it's just something that's dumb and crazy, you won't actually get that many downvotes. But if you say something that is like actually very objectively true, but is just very much against the grain of what Reddit thinks, and you are convincing at it, you get downvoted very, very hard. And that is why I believe that I'm good at that. So I think that you could do that. And if I was taking from this situation, and I was trying to argue against myself on this particular one, right? So here's the issue with trying to do that right now at this moment. If I'm trying to put myself in Ace's shoes, okay? Ace doesn't know what the fuck I'm talking about. I'm making a claim about information that has come out in Georgia. Ace doesn't know what that information is, right? So he's trying to make an argument against the new piece of information that I have mentioned without actually knowing what the data is. And so everything that he says about it ends up being very unconvincing, right? So what you would need to do is you would have to go and watch the video, right? And then you would say you could try and make an argument. Now, this is where it gets really hard, because when I look at that evidence, I've seen a lot of stuff from the election that is like, well, mistakes happen. Okay? That would probably be the argument. No, there wasn't actually fraud. All of the evidence that was presented on Tucker Carlson's monologue last night can all be explained by fringe errors. Somebody counted a ballot twice. Somebody accidentally, they were absent-minded and they took this stack of papers and they went and they scanned it through here twice because they didn't realize and they were being absent-minded. Like, that would be like the kind of the argument that you would normally make, right? In this particular instance, that also was not very convincing because here in this instance, they actually went through the votes. Like, they had the tabulations, and it was like there was situations where it was like, 60 votes for Biden and 40 votes for Donald Trump, but on the tabulation paper, it said 100 for Biden. Like, how is that? How do you explain that one? Okay. People made a mistake, then why is it 100? Okay, if it was just a mistake, why did you do it hundreds of times until the point that it was like thousands of votes, right? That one is like, I don't know if it changes the actual outcome. It's enough to change the outcome. And even if it doesn't change the outcome, to be quite frank, it should still be investigated. They should still get to the bottom of that. And if it was a election worker ran the ballots through multiple times, which it looks like did happen, I sure hope that they're going and they're finding the person that ran the ballots multiple times and prosecuting them. Seriously, because that is like fundamental to the way that democracy works. And if there are problems with the way the vote counting, we need to get to the bottom of that regardless of what the outcome of it is. Yet Tucker is generally wrong and conspiratorial and skewed politically enough that when someone says, look at what Tucker said, it can usually be treated like Tucker is a joke rather than an authority. Right. But you realize at the same time, Teller, that it is a logical fallacy, right? And I think you understand that, and you're not trying to say that everything that Tucker Carlson says is false. But what I'm trying to say is that it's not an effective argument either. So from your perspective, Tucker Carlson is not very authoritative. So the first thing that you think of is, oh, well, if it's Tucker Carlson, because to you, in your worldview, that is a significant piece of information. But to the person that already is partial to Tucker Carlson, or more importantly, the person who has no clue who Tucker Carlson is, like if you were a computer trying to determine what was logical and what was not, it's irrelevant information, right? And because it's irrelevant, it becomes extremely unconvincing to the person on the other side making the argument, right? Like, now I can't get past the fact that your initial response, because remember, this is so essential in understanding the way that people converse. Okay? People use the most effective argument they think they have first. That's just the way that we work, right? So if the most effective argument that you think you have is to deride Tucker Carlson, what am I supposed to think about the rest of your argument? You get what I mean? Do you see why it's not a very effective tactic to even bring it up? Okay, cool. I am open to the idea of widespread election fraud. I will let the folks who have access to all the data make the call. I'm glad you say it that way, because the whole problem is that they're trying to prevent people from looking at it. this data, the thing that's crazy about this one is that the information that they learned all of this stuff from, they had to go through this huge court battle, like, and the county that they were subpoenaing or whatever it was, like, really worked hard to prevent that information from getting out. And then they finally got it, and oh, what do you know? There's all of this evidence of widespread fraud. I don't know. Widespread is like a really, it's not a very quantitative measure, right? But it looked like there was probably a few people doing the vote counting, trying to put their finger on the scale, you know? Okay, Tucker Carlson apologized for making false claims about Georgia back in November 2020. He says one thing on the air and another in court. Yeah, so in this particular case, so here's another thing about this one. Ignore Tucker Carlson because he's not the one that did this research. Okay, it was a group that their whole purpose is to investigate voter fraud, and they went and they did all of the court documents. These journalists or some I don't know if you call them journalists, but then they talked to the newspaper in Georgia, and they had real journalists like check all of their work and stuff like that. So if we were going to use an attacking the messenger argument, it would really need to be about the people that actually did the research, right? I only used Tucker Carlson because, well, for two reasons, really. One was because I know that that's the easiest way for you to find that information. Okay, because when everybody's linking it, they're just linking to Tucker right now. He's just the one that put this story out there that ended up getting the most traffic for it. But two, because I knew it would kind of trigger you guys. Because I knew that if I used Tucker Carlson, that then I could get the whole argument and I could get hits on you guys complaining about Tucker. Yes, I'll admit it. But when I'm arguing on politics, I will use the dirty tactics. It was a dirty tactic. But I'm trying to explain to you what is effective ways of convincing people and what are not. Because certainly in the political arena. I have to admit, here's the thing that's so weird to me. When I get into politics, I feel like that I can play this game pretty well. Like I feel like I got pretty good at it, because basically there are the people that you're not going to convince, and there's the people that you're going to convince. And you can kind of come in and you can piss off the people that you're not going to convince, but all of the people that are actually convincible and are, you know, persuadable are watching it and like see what's going on. They see that, oh, this person is not acting rationally. They're just believing and this person actually has evidence and facts and stuff like that, right? And the way that you present it can make it very, very convincing. And the Republican Party, I'd always been doing this, but I saw very much when it was Donald Trump against Hillary Clinton in 2016, the Republican Party used those kinds of tactics very effectively. But if I try and make that kind of argument when it comes to investing or markets, nobody cares. It's like those kinds of arguments don't convince people at all. In that sphere, it seems to me like the only thing that convinces people is making extraordinary claims. Coming in and saying, I'm so rich, I'm going to make you all rich too. And then that's what people listen to. I don't get it. Because to me, somebody comes out and says, I'm rich and I'm going to make you rich too. That is an immediate red flag. I don't know if I was just trained that way or my mind works differently or what, but that is red flag number one. This is probably a scam. You know what I mean? And I don't know what to do to make some of these arguments, particularly with the argument about technical analysis. This is really the one that really bothers me, is how do you convince people that these indicators that they're using aren't effective? I don't get it. For stock, it's one thing for stocks. If you're using it for filtering which stock you're going to trade, it's a different thing. Okay. But if you're scalping and you're trying to determine which direction an asset is going to go in the next 5 minutes based off of purely technical analysis, you're going to have a hard time. And I don't know how to convince people of that, because it doesn't look like I've convinced very many people on that one, does it? Wouldn't making extraordinary claims also make people watch a channel like Tucker's? Well, sorry. Extraordinary claims wasn't really the thing that I was kind of trying to... It's not so much the extraordinary claims. What it really should be is promises of riches. Tucker Carlson doesn't make promises of riches. But what Tucker Carlson does do, and I am kind of trying to take advantage of it a little bit, and if I had some success, is that he does... I wouldn't say extraordinary claims. What would be a better way of doing it? Of explaining it, describing it. He leverages controversy is how I would do it. So, for instance, 2 days ago, when we had the big CPI, I made a TikTok video because somebody was saying, well, it's really not very bad. Well, I understand their argument, but there's really no way of presenting Tuesday's CPI data as anything other than extraordinarily high. Like that could well, and the PPI in particular could well be like the highest inflation report we ever see, you know? So I made a thread being like, this is how ridiculous it is. Like, here's how much. Like, okay, one of the things that he said was, hey, yeah, these numbers are a little high, but they were like negative before. It was like, yeah, but it was like negative 1% before, and now it's positive 10%. So how do you sort that one out, buddy? Right? But I was very animated about it. I made it like it was a controversial thing, right? And people liked it. People shared the video. People liked the video, and it got a lot of views as a result. Versus the videos where I just calmly explain what's going on. They don't pick up on it. So I made another one yesterday about the Democrats. We haven't talked about the Democrats' reconciliation bill. Have you seen that whole thing? Oh my gosh. $3.5 trillion budget. And basically what they did was they took all of the climate change initiatives and stuff that they wanted to have in the infrastructure bill, and they just took it out and put it in their budget bill. Now, the issue is that they can pass that bill. If not a single Democrat diverges, if all 50 of them vote yes, and then Kamala Harris votes yes, then they can pass it. And they can use reconciliation to pass it with a 50% vote. Okay. But then you get to the problems, right? Problem number one. They have 2 weeks. They want to get it done before the quarter end or whatever. They have 2 weeks to put this bill out and try and get it done. And they haven't even written it yet. Of course, they can just take pieces of legislation that they've already written that didn't pass and put it in together. But that's a big pull already, right? Is that it's not written. And then the next issue is that it has to be revenue neutral, or rather it cannot increase the budget. So what happens if the Congressional Budget Office comes back and says it increases the budget? And considering that it's $3.5 trillion in new spending, is that actually going to be revenue neutral? That's a really tough pull, right? Your taxes are going to have to get scored by the CBO just right. It's awfully hard. And then you're going to have to convince Sienma and Manchin that all of those new taxes are actually worth it. And I'm going to say it's based on how he's reacted in the past. It's probably going to be too much. So if they want to get it passed, they're probably going to have to pare it down significantly. So like it stands no chance of passing. Well, when I did it, I tried to be way more animated than that. And actually, let's go and look, because when I woke up this morning, it had like 500 views, which was more than my average video, but could be wrong. Yeah, now this one is also getting almost into 1,000 views now. That seems to work. So weird, right? I think I've exhausted y'all. Ace had to go. Oh, Uzi said something else that I want to address too. I don't know if it will read it out though. The text, part of the problem with the text-to-speech is that Google changed something, and like it takes a lot longer to get messages to read out now for some reason. It's like if I'm doing the checks, then it comes over here and it says these ones. But Uzi says, I mean, if I'm being honest, how does anyone really determine who's right and who's wrong in this kind of environment? Well, it's really issue to issue, right? One of the big issues that we have is that on a lot of things that are going on right now, we kind of have to take people's word for it, right? Like, I think oh, see, now we'll say,
how the fuck does anyone really determine who's right and who's wrong in this kind of environment?
That's how long it took it for it to read it out. Good grief. So, like, if I don't know anything about global warming, and I don't have the time to go and do all of the research, then, like, yeah, I have to take people's word for it. And there's not a lot of reason for me to believe that their word won't have a bias in it, right? So I think that there are many situations where you really can't know unless you're really truly willing to become the expert in that thing. And are there things that you can look for and do to assure yourself that if you are taking somebody's word for it, the expert, that they're actually going to be giving you good information and good advice? Well, the whole argument has been we should trust the experts and that they know what's going on and everything. But the conclusion that I've come to is that it's impossible for me to know which experts are truly worth listening to unless I really know everything about the subject myself, in which case I don't need the expert. I don't know what you do about that. It's a real problem because here in our society, we've gotten to the point where you can't know everything. There are definitely things that I don't know about. Like the global warming debate thing. Like I have an issue with like models, and I have an issue with that. I don't think that enough effort has been put into the nullifying the hypothesis. But in terms of like, how do they determine what percentage is man-made and what comes from the sun, and like what all of the research is on that and stuff? I don't know that. I don't care. Really don't care. From my perspective, it's like, if it's a problem, then the market will then there will be an incentive for people to fix the problem. I think everybody thinks of global warming as like the pollution problem, right? Like in pollution, if you create pollution, you create an externality on other people, and the market has to price that in, usually by fining you, right? Or a tax or something, or a Peruvian tax, I think is what they call it. But it's not the case with global warming. Like there is so much of a market for energy and for new types of energy that the market is already investing in this on its own, right? So from my perspective, like, it doesn't matter if it is or it isn't. Like, it's a money-making opportunity. I think where things get confusing is that we can never figure out if a bias towards being unbiased is a bias or not. Like, is it okay to be intolerant of intolerance? Okay. So in my view of philosophy, I think that you're kind of moving into a different issue, right? because really the issue is what is the threshold for certain kinds of action. Mohammed says you banned me on Discord. I just want to help that. Well, okay, I'll unban you, but don't post links. Actually, can I even find which one it was? I saw you commented on the video. I was really surprised. Who was it? It was Mistake, right? Was your name? No, that's not what it was. I don't remember now. Oh, I'd have to go through the edit log. I'll have to do it later because the streamer mode is enabled. Okay. Anyways, so like for instance, like at what point is political violence acceptable, right? In my opinion, the threshold for that is way higher than people put it, right? Like there's a lot of people saying, well, we should be intolerant of intolerance because it's going to lead to this particular thing in society. But like they're making this argument that like it's going to lead to genocide, and like, you know, on the scale of like how bad things get, like here is like what it should be, and maybe here's where we are, and genocide is like all the way in the other room. Okay. Okay. Well, I got to get going, guys. I had fun, and we did get a good trade in on the bot, at least. I sucks that my treasury trading was so bad, but I can't really explain why the treasury's acting the way that they are today. I suppose that they could just be random movements, so I think I have a little bit of research to do, though, try and figure out what to do with it. Anyways, I'll see you guys tomorrow. In the meantime,